I think, yeah, all right, here we are. We are live.
Alrighty.
Awesome. Cool. So, hello, everybody. I'm Brian, the American Taiwan, and welcome to the AmeriTaiNadian podcast number 3. Episode number 2 was on Dan's channel, so please check that out if you haven't. And yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I'll throw it over to Dan to say hello to everyone.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, pleased to be back. Apologies on my end for taking so long to get ready for another episode, but yeah, I'm glad we're doing this again.
Yeah, not bad, not bad. So, okay, today's topic, and we discussed this a little bit beforehand in private. It's going to be, again, it's going to be soft power. So I'm going to kind of pick up where we left off in the podcast number 2. And so I think it would be good if we just quickly reviewed what is soft power. So Dan, do you want to speak about that?
I'll give it a shot. I actually didn't know what soft power was until you mentioned it to me, but soft power is basically trying to get influence without the use of military force. And I guess we should talk a little bit about why we think it's important regarding Taiwan. Obviously, China is just it's the biggest superpower in the world, and according to some economists, it might surpass the United States in GDP over the next couple of years. And they obviously have a much stronger military than Taiwan ever will. So I guess yours and my interest would be to get people to be aware of Taiwan's situation. I'll throw it back to you there.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly right. So yeah, again, so soft power, it's basically you projecting your influence and projecting your power without the use of the military, right? You flex your muscles, but you do it with you do it with soft power. You do it with your culture, with your food, with your movies, music, and the list goes on and on. It's pretty much endless, right? Anything you can think of that doesn't involve armored cars and tanks and guns.
Right.
So yeah, and Dan is right. Obviously China is huge. Their economy is huge, and I happen to agree with what he said. That about the economist saying that the Chinese economy is probably going to surpass the U.S. economy and eventually be the largest economy in the world. So their power and their soft power is going to be tremendous, whether people realize it or not.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and it's not like China's only using, they're also using soft power too. So it's like if Taiwan already doesn't have any hope in terms of defending themselves with their military, they really have to step up their soft power game.
Oh, hell yeah. So look,
Yeah.
So here, I'll just put this out there. I think it's a massive problem that if you asked anybody where I come from, right, which is Southern California, and I think this is probably true for Dan as well. If you asked anybody just on the street in British Columbia about China, they would have plenty to say, and they would know plenty about it. But if you did the same thing with Taiwan, they would be like, "What? What is that?" I'm not quite sure. Do you mean Thailand? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm a bit confused. Can you clarify that, please? Right.
Yeah.
So this is a big problem. Like the fact that people don't even know that this place exists is a big problem, in my opinion. And I think Dan agrees with me on that.
Yeah, I think every time whenever somebody asks me, "Oh, where are you from?" or "What type of Asian are you?" or whatever, I'll say Taiwan, and I always have to make sure it's not Thailand, it's Taiwan, right?
Right. Yeah, you have to explain yourself, right?
Yeah, and thankfully, I think whether or not you think there are obviously pros and cons, but because of the Trump presidency, right? I think the day after he won the election, or maybe the day after the inauguration, there was that controversy with Trump picking up Tsai Ing-wen's phone call.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Right?
That was quite the controversy. That's true.
I don't know how the how the Taiwanese media was covering it, but
Oh,
on
people
the
were ecstatic. Are you kidding?
exactly. So, in the West, there's a lot of interest in most liberal media to try to just criticize Trump whenever they can, and rightfully so. But
Right, right. But
but
look, so here, I think this is where you're going is you have to give credit where credit's due. You have to be principled. Even if you might really hate Trump, if he just so happens to get something right, you do have to be like, all right, fine, dude, you got it right. Okay, well done. You got to be fair. That's what you got to be.
yeah, and because of this controversy, I feel like more people have gotten to know, oh, what is this Taiwan place, and has gotten people to go kind of like Google what Taiwan is. So that is kind of an upside to
Yeah,
this,
you're
I
right.
think.
Trump might have stumbled into or have pushed the world into this awkward kind of situation where people are by accident learning about it, right?
Yeah, and of course because Obama is a lot more, I don't know, aware and
Measured
careful,
and
measured.
careful and just more cautious and more stately, I think.
He wouldn't have made this mistake,
Oh
and
no, of
maybe
course not.
right, and maybe less people would have known about. There would have been less reason to have Taiwan in Western media.
Right. But see, okay, so now is that a problem? I mean, the fact that Obama was so careful and clean and polished and that he would have never even gotten anywhere near Taiwan because it would have caused a big ruckus and it would have offended so many people, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Trump is just like, la 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 la, I do whatever I want, fuck everyone. Like,
So yeah, pros and cons, right?
yeah, right. Like, in some ways, he could be beneficial, you
Hmm.
know, despite his I don't know what I would call it, bumbling, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess before we go, any further, even though I kind of said this before, even though China has this like strong military, right? They're also putting influence on their soft power side too. So I don't know. You can't really go short on emphasizing the importance of why Taiwan really needs to up their game in
Yeah,
this regard.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So here, well, let me start down the rabbit hole then. So if I was going to ask you, and you can imagine, just imagine yourself as someone who was just, John Smith, like a nobody on the street. Okay. So if I asked you, Mr. John Smith, can you tell me one or two books that come from China, famous books? Go ahead.
I mean, depending on how aware John Smith is, I guess.
John Smith is university educated, just for the sake of the
Okay.
argument.
There was The Art of War, I think.
Okay,
People in
there
the
you go.
West.
Exactly. Okay, so number one, Sun Tzu's The Art of War, and
Yeah.
then
I don't know what
certainly
are
you can give me another. Come now.
no, people in the West. Books coming from China.
Right.
Oh, the Great Leap Forward.
Sure. Okay, and then I'm thinking the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Right. Any one of those
Uh,
volumes. They're
okay.
numerous.
Right,
Okay.
right. Yeah, I think out of those three that we listed, I feel like that one might be the least popular because with the Art of War, business Mongols use that. The Great
Sure.
Leap Forward, it's really kind of close to modern history, kind of.
Right. Right.
You'd really have to be an enthusiast to go so far to study to be interested in.
Yeah, you have to be a little bit into it, but still, I think you would agree, at least for the Art of War, that there's a decent chance you would be able to name that one.
Hmm.
Okay, so now how about Taiwan? If I ask Mr. John Smith about Taiwan, can you name me a single book, any book at all? You have to admit that you can't do it.
I can do it. No,
You couldn't do it. Couldn't name
no,
a single one.
no.
That's a problem. That's a huge
Yeah,
problem, right?
yeah,
I mean, the fact that you couldn't name a single solitary book to come out of this country is that's an issue. And it's
right.
not like we don't have authors here. It's not like people don't know how to write, but for some reason, uh, it's not being felt. Like the books aren't being pushed. The influence is not there. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. I don't know if we haven't tried hard enough, or if it was because of the past with the dictatorship that information or things like that weren't allowed out, or there wasn't even an attempt to do so. I'm not even sure.
I feel like it might have a little bit to do with, and we talked a little bit about this in the last episode of how the U.S. and the UN acknowledged the People's Republic of China as the China,
Right, in the late
and then
70s.
in the late 70s, and that kind of had a domino effect in everybody else, citizens, Americans, Canadians, whoever it is, to kind of accept that as well. And then, so again, less people know about Taiwan because of that, because the consensus was, it's just a rogue or a province with it. It's a part of China, so we don't really need to think about it.
Mm-hmm,
You
mm-hmm.
know, and we talk about all these big icons of Chinese culture, because the consensus was, Taiwan's just a part of China. People don't think about Taiwan, I think.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It's interesting consensus, right? Because like you think, but whose consensus is it, right? Is
Yeah.
it the PRC government, or is it even the KMT government, right? Because I certainly think for a large number of the people here, just common people, that was not a consensus.
Yeah.
I think this is a consensus of governments, not of people.
It's politics.
Yeah, right. It's ugly politics.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm hoping that's going to change, and I know you are too. And so let
Mhm.
me bring this up really quick. I put this out there on Instagram, and you might have saw it or you might have not. So recently we had a holiday here in Taiwan. That's 228, as they call it here, or February 28th, and that was to commemorate the February 28th massacre, or as some call it, the February 28th incident. I had
Wait, is it
checked that name.
actually, sorry, is it actually a holiday?
Yes, it is. It's
Oh,
actually it's
wow.
a national holiday. We all get the day off of work and school and all that.
I didn't know that.
Um,
Has that always been the case?
oh no, certainly not.
Okay.
Remember, Dan, that this was a dictatorship until the late 80s,
Yeah.
and you couldn't even get people to admit that any of the things that had happened here in the past 40 years had actually happened. They wouldn't
Wow.
even admit it,
Hmm.
right? Like it was all, everything was hush hush, right?
Hmm.
People couldn't even admit that something happened. Like it took a long time for any politician to come out and be like, yeah, okay, you know what, it's true, and we're sorry, and we did do that, and like we're gonna put up some statues and plaques and everything, so we can all remember, rest in peace, thoughts and prayers.
Hmm.
You know.
It's interesting. Yeah, I actually, there is a garden in Vancouver dedicated to Dr. Sun Yat-sen. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you, and I know some people in Taiwan. I actually talked to another Taiwanese person, and he didn't consider Dr. Sun Yat-sen to be, Guofu of Taiwan, meaning God. Or
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, think about it. Did Dr. Sun Yat-sen ever even set foot on Taiwanese soil?
yeah, no, he was. He'd be the founding father of the KMT, not necessarily having to do that much with Taiwan,
Right,
right? Yeah.
right.
And so I took my dad to this garden, and I thought it'd be a good time to bring up the 228. How would you say it in English? 228 or a massacre?
I always call it the 228 massacre. I
Okay.
refuse to call it an incident because
Right.
that, if you ask me, that's a whitewash. Like they're
Hmm.
trying to like clean up what they did, you know.
Right.
Oh, it was a mistake. It was an accident. People got heated. No, it wasn't. I mean, let's just keep it real here, okay?
Yeah.
Not hundreds, but tens of thousands of people island wide were massacred, taken from their homes, shot, executed, tortured. And let's remember, a fair number of the victims were children. They were
Mm.
children.
Well. Yeah. Well.
So
So.
I'm not calling it an incident. I'm not
Right.
going to do that. I refuse
Yeah.
to do that. It's an insult. It's an insult.
Yeah. For the longest time, me being born and raised in Vancouver, and my family that is in Vancouver that I grew up with in Vancouver are mainly from my dad's side. My mom
Hmm.
is the only person that is on her side. Everybody else on my mom's side is in Taiwan, and on my dad's side, they're kind of because his dad was a KMT soldier
Yeah, do you want to
um,
explain that really quickly? Just give a brief background
of my family. You mean?
of, yeah, of how that works. So your mom's side being Hoklo and your father's coming from mainland China.
Or my grandfather. My dad was born in Taiwan.
Right. Sorry, you know what I mean.
Right. So my dad was born and raised in Taiwan, but his dad was born in mainland China, a conscripted into the KMT army, and after the Civil War in 1949, that was when my grandfather came to Taiwan, and he married a Taiwanese native. Um, and so, with that being said, the family that I grew up with, I kind of always I only knew about KMT and I only knew about, Dr. Sun Yat sen and Chiang Kai shek was the founding father of Taiwan. Just ideas like this that was
Right,
very,
like a very nationalist mindset.
very blue, because that's the family
Hmm.
that I grew up with, as opposed to the more greenish,
Well,
which was,
not necessarily though, but maybe just a Taiwanese perspective. We'll call it that.
it was right. So when I asked my dad about the 228 massacre, as we'll call it, he actually, well, I wouldn't be surprised that he knew about it, but he knew about it, and I said, but you guys didn't learn about that
Wow,
in.
really? He did know about it.
Oh, he did know about it, and I said,
Okay, I'm a
but
little bit
you.
surprised to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I don't. So my follow up question was, because I would assume that he learned about it afterwards when it was more democratic and he came to Vancouver. Maybe he found it online or
Yeah,
whatever it
you know what?
was.
There's only one way to find out. You got to
Yeah.
ask him.
And I did. My follow up question was, but you didn't learn that in public school, right? Because that would have been, whatever it was. And he said, no, we did learn about it in public school, but we didn't go that much further. But we didn't talk about it that much further. But I would assume that they kind of just glossed over it, which is kind of why they call it an incident. Maybe they just
Hmm.
whitewashed it.
Hmm.
That's what I would assume.
Yeah, you got to think about it, and I honestly don't know, and
Hmm.
I'm not sure you do either. But obviously, there's a difference, right? And obviously, I think I'm certain that there's a difference between the written Chinese word for incident and also
Hmm.
the written Chinese word for a massacre. They're obviously different, right?
Yeah, my
And
my
so
dad.
when you say that or when you write that, you're choosing to put a perspective on that.
Right. When my dad, I forgot how I asked him in Chinese, but he did call it the 228. He used the words 事件, which would mean case or
Incident, basically.
incident.
So
Yeah.
he used the same language
Yeah, but
because that
I,
was probably what he was used to.
that's probably what he was taught, and that was kind of probably what the consensus was. So
Sure,
that's
sure.
probably what he called it. Yeah.
Right, not to put politics on it, but he probably just said that because that's the only way he knew how to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. But sorry, I interrupted you. Why did you bring the holiday
No,
up?
anyway, so right, so we had the holiday, and I posted on Instagram. I'm not sure if you saw it or not, but so books, and I started this book right here.
I saw that. Yeah.
This is called Green Island, and it's by a Taiwanese American woman called, well, you can see it right here, Shana Yang Brian. And the reason I started it on February 28th is because that's when the story begins. On
Mm.
February 28th, 1947, which is the exact date that was the beginning of the February 28th massacre. And so far, this book, I'm about 75% of the way through it. You can see where I folded the page end.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. It's a really, really good book.
Mm.
And so basically, just to give a rundown, the story begins on that night, and it follows this family through the massacre and on into the White Terror period, and even beyond into like the early 2000s. And so it's, I mean, I can't say enough. I haven't finished it yet. So, right, I mean, I guess I could change my final opinion, right?
Hmm.
Because I don't know the outcome. But so far, so good. I feel like I can't put it down. I mean, there's so much in here. She's a good writer. I mean, I
Hmm.
don't know very much about her, other than that she's a Taiwanese American woman and she's very educated and she's a good writer.
So is it a
But
nonfiction account of?
yeah, so to clarify, it's what you would call, the genre would be called historical fiction.
Hmm.
So you're placing your fictional characters into actual events that went down.
Oh,
Because the February 28th massacre was real.
right, right,
The White Terror period was real, right? A bunch of the things that happen in this book, she talks about the meeting with Nixon and Kissinger and Mao Zedong in the 80s. She talks about Jimmy Carter, right? Things that we've talked about, Dan, back and forth.
right.
So she places her fictional characters in the middle of all of this, and this story unfolds. And it takes several twists and turns. And I really like it because besides one thing, I really didn't know which way it was going to go. I mean, she genuinely surprised me with the way she was writing, right?
Hmm.
Like there was really only one part where I was like, as soon as I read the page, I was like, that's it. I already know. Like this dude right here, dude is dead. Like
Hmm.
this dude's got no chance. He's dead.
Right.
Like it's over. I know exactly how this is going to happen. But beyond that, she genuinely surprised me, and it's been an exciting book. And honestly, I feel like you could take this book again, Green Island, and it's movie worthy.
Hmm.
It will probably never be made into a movie, and we can talk about why that is,
Hmm.
but it's certainly worthy of that. And I would recommend that everyone who's watching this give it a read. And I would recommend that, Dan, I think you should read it too. I think you would appreciate it, especially because you have a lot of background and you would understand about what they're talking about here.
Right.
The only thing I would say is that I think I would be concerned that somebody who didn't have any background at all with Taiwan would would not fully understand the book. They wouldn't fully appreciate it. If you're going to read this book, you need to study up a little bit first. Like you need to get a brief outline at least of basic Taiwanese history going back, let's say, at least 100 years. Like you have to at least have some basic background, or you're just not going to understand all the little details and the subtleties that she puts into the story. It's a very rich story, but if you don't understand all the backstory, all the background, the historical background, you're going to miss out on a lot of things.
Hmm. You said something there that actually piqued my interest. Why don't you think that this book would ever be made into a movie?
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Uh, so there's a lot of countries in the world that have followed Taiwan's path, let's call it, right, where they war and massacres and death, and then a long period of dictatorship and suppression, oppression, and then a slow emerging into democracy, right, into a liberal democracy. South Korea is a very good example. South Korea followed a very similar path, right? They had a war. America was involved in the war. After the war, South Korea was basically a dictatorship. They had their own dictator, just like Chiang Kai-shek and
Hmm.
just like Chiang Ching-kuo, right? And now they're in this period now of modern days where they're in democracy, right? And just so it's not like, I think the one that's easiest for Americans to understand would be the Nazis, right? I hate to bring up the Nazis, but I got to bring up the Nazis because um, the way it went in Germany was the Nazis were completely and utterly defeated
In World
and
War
pushed
II
out of
one.
power, 100%. And
Mhm.
that's just not the way it happened here in Taiwan. You got to understand it was a slow transition, right? And the
Mm.
KMT was not entirely defeated, and they weren't entirely pushed out and dissolved, right? They're still here. They're still
Right.
here to this day.
Mm.
So part of the reason why I think Green Island will never be made into a movie is because of politics and money. The politics being that you're going to piss off all the hardcore blue people in this country.
Mm.
You won't be able to sell the movie overseas to the primary market, which would be mainland China, because they're not going to play a movie about Taiwanese dissidents, and massacres and people doing anti-government bombings and assassinations. They're not going to play a movie like that. They would never play a movie like that. So you're missing out on all that money from the mainland market, right? You're
Right.
pissing off people here. There's controversy here. There's controversy over there. It's just never going to happen.
Oh, that discourages me a lot.
It's a bummer, right? Because I feel like it would, if it did come out, I feel like it would be a big hit here. Obviously, it would piss people off, but it would be a big hit here. A lot of people would go to see it, especially because all the newspapers and TV shows would be talking about it, like, ooh, salacious, scandalous, right? People love scandalous shit. You know that,
Right.
right? They love that tabloid shit. And
Yeah.
so they would go to see it here, but it wouldn't get the play over there in mainland China. And they would lose a ton of money because of that. And I'm not even sure how it would play overseas, right? Even though a good portion of this book is where the main characters spend time in America and San Francisco, and they speak English, right? A good portion of this book, like the back half, is in English, is in the English language, right? I'm just not sure how it would play in the States,
Wait, are you saying the first half of the book is in Chinese?
Well, yeah, so it begins in Taipei in 1947, and our main character does not leave Taiwan to go live in the States until basically halfway through the book.
Okay, but it's all written in English, right?
Right. Well, yeah,
Okay,
right.
good.
So
Okay.
the for clarity, the
Good.
copy I'm reading is in English, right? Almost
Gotcha.
everything in this book is in English.
Right.
But there is a copy, just so everyone knows, if you're interested, there is a copy of this book fully in Chinese. So if you're Taiwanese or you're Chinese or if you're whatever, and you happen to read in your primary language of reading, at least is in Chinese characters, then you can get this book and you can read it, and I encourage you to do so.
I wonder, yeah, that's really interesting.
So you're disappointed, but like, I mean, do you feel like I do? I mean, I wish movies like that would come out. I want to get into this subject. I want to get into this topic. And I don't like it when people say things like, no, it's too dangerous, or it's too tense, like, or there's things that you're not allowed to talk about. Like that line, especially when people says, no, you can't talk about that. Like, no, I can talk about that. Like, I will talk about that. Don't tell me I can't talk about that.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I have a particular grudge. Even though I was born and raised in Canada, I have a particular grudge against censorship of any kind. And it might be hard for you to imagine because I was born and raised in Canada where there's pretty much no censorship at all.
Right, liberal democracy.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, I am of the mind that everything should be on the table and up for discussion.
Right. Yeah. No enforced secrets. Right.
Yeah.
Like
I
I
wonder.
believe in free speech. I'm pretty strong with that belief, and I think you are too. Like you're
Yeah.
pretty pro free speech, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. In fact, I was thinking, how I don't know. There's a lot of people in America or in the West, even in the Britain, and which resulted in Brexit. People who are very scared of globalism.
Globalization. Yeah.
Globalization, and
Right.
globalist is a kind of a scary word, so to speak.
Yeah. For different reasons, it gets complicated.
And so I've been thinking, if in a hypothetical scenario where we do, become very open, all countries are talking to each other, and we do really become even more of a globalist society than we are now. If I were to, list the top 3 global rules, I would put free speech as top 1, top 3, maybe even like right off the bat. The first rule is you don't fuck with free speech. I think the
I
Americans have
totally
that.
agree with that. I totally
Yeah,
agree with that. That's why I think that I mean, America, for all her faults, and they are many, you know, one of the things that we got right, and I think one of the greatest documents ever written was actually our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and everything, where they basically said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You can say what you want. You're free to go where you want. Right? There's no restrictions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like even people who might be in our camp of forget the politics, but even people who we would think are, good people, I feel like this generation kind of takes free speech for granted a little
Oh,
bit
I
because they've
totally
been
agree. I totally
because
agree.
they've been born and raised in, a country that has it, and they don't
Right.
know what it's like to
This is
possibly.
part of what this book has been reminding me of,
Okay.
is that, and why I like it so much is because it's kind of reminding me and like challenging me a little bit. Um, because the characters in the book, they live constantly in fear.
Mm,
Constantly. They're afraid. They have anxiety. They're nervous. They have to talk in hushed tones. They have to be extremely careful who sees them, where they're seen, who's seen talking to who, because everyone and anyone could potentially be an informant. They could be writing about you and reporting about you. This goes down to even your own family members, right? Like you live in this world of fear and silence, right?
you're talking about Taiwan and the KMT, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but it back in the day, right? Obviously, where this novel is set. But remember, this is reality right now in a number of countries all around the world, even though we're in 2019,
Hmm.
right? So you're right. I think people in the West, young people like us, either in millennials or Gen Z or whatever, they take it for granted. Like we walk around carefree pretty much, and we say whatever we want pretty much. A lot of people around the world got to watch their mouth,
Hmm.
because you never know. You say the wrong words and someone heard you, and next thing you know, you're getting the shit kicked out of you, and you're
Yeah.
being thrown into some, black site prison somewhere with getting car batteries attached to you.
Yeah. So what on the soft power front for Taiwan? What do you think has been done currently that has been somewhat effective?
Okay, so recently, and I forget, we've had so many conversations, right?
Yeah.
But recently, I think there has been like a minor push in the sector of tourism. Like they've tried to do some advertisements abroad, right? They tried to do a big advertising team on New York City subway, right? They coated the trains in like these bright colored stickers and laminations and tried to get people excited to come and visit Taiwan. And there's also been the government policy here of kind of easing visa restrictions and trying to encourage tourism from, in particular, Southeast Asia and South Asia, right? Like places like Vietnam and the Philippines and Indonesia, and get them to come here and contribute to tourism, and to try to remove the market from being so reliant on mainland tourism. Because when a market becomes reliant on one source, it's very dangerous. Because
Hmm.
if something disrupts that source, right, like you're basically in a famine. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah. You got to diversify.
Yeah, right. That's the right word.
Right.
They're trying to diversify because it's very dangerous in any kind of economic sphere, I think, to become reliant on only one thing.
Hmm. Okay. And so tourism,
Tourism, right.
okay.
So back to soft power. I keep getting sidetracked, but yeah, I've seen a recent push in tourism. Has it been enough? I don't think so, but I appreciate the effort.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, you know, I I've learned in, the recent weeks you've invited me to some pages on Facebook talk that are that share the same voice that you have, and I've learned that there are people in Taiwan that would push against this direction. They would want, oh, forget about opening visas to foreigners. We should be more close with the mainland.
Yeah, you've heard
So
that. You've seen them, right?
I've seen that, and I recognize that over the past few weeks, even just getting to know you, I've learned that there's such a huge spectrum of uh, different stances within that small island of Taiwan. There's the people that are, they actually are a fan of the Communist Party of China, and then there's
Yeah.
the KMT who isn't a fan of the Communist Party of China, but they still identify as Chinese, as do I, but they don't want
I
to
think in a
rely
different way, though.
in a sure, sure.
It's definitely in a different way. we should clarify that a little bit, right?
Sure. But they do want to distance themselves from, the United States. They don't want to depend on the United States. They do
Yeah,
want to be
right.
closer
They want
with
to
China.
realign and basically realign with mainland China and become, I don't know what they would call it, some goofy thing like we're cousins or we're family or we're brothers or this and that. We're twins. I don't know what they call it,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, so there would be opposition.
Yeah, there's a rainbow of opinions, right? And
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, did that surprise you?
Well, growing up, being born and raised here again, I guess I just naively always assume, oh, what the Taiwanese or the Taiwanese, and because I've never really studied these things, and I've just spent my entire life here. I just, without thinking, just assume that they're kind of homogenous. Even
Yeah, see, that's the thing. You may not be able to tell them apart just by looking at them,
yeah,
but we have diversity here,
yeah,
and not just in ethnicity, but also in opinions. You'll find all kind of different people here, but
yeah,
the only way to find out is by talking to them.
yeah. All right, so you talked about, I think, your favorite Taiwanese film being, I don't know if it was your favorite, but the Warriors of the Rainbow.
Right. So yeah, let's get into it. One of the best ways I think, and I'll ask Dan this question in a second, but in my personal opinion, one of the best ways to project soft power is through the use of the art form of film,
Hmm.
right? Motion pictures. And because if I asked anybody around the world to name me American movies, the list would be endless.
Right.
And in a large part, the way American people view themselves is shaped by movies. I
Yeah.
think especially when it comes to like something, let's say, for example, the war in Vietnam,
Hmm.
right? So just that. So yeah, let's launch into it. I want Taiwan to make more movies, but here's a number of films that I have seen, some that Dan has seen, and some that neither of us have seen, but that I want to introduce and we can talk about them. And just for a start, I showed this one at the tail end of our last podcast, but here it is again. Dan just briefly mentioned it, but I'll let him go further just really quick. This is the Warriors of the Rainbow, Sedi Kabalai, and it's about Taiwanese Aboriginal people rebelling against the Imperial Japanese. It's basically a Mel Gibson Braveheart movie for Taiwanese people. And yeah, I'll let Dan speak more about that.
Yeah, so I did remember watching, I think, trailers about it when it was coming out, and I, just for the sake of this episode and for my own refresher, I saw it a couple weeks ago. So it's about, before the oh god, I have to think back now. Before the Japanese came,
Right,
and
Qing Dynasty times.
right, there were I guess commonly known as generally 12 tribes in Taiwan, Aboriginal tribes that would have rivalries and fight amongst each other. But then it was after the Japanese that kind of made a deal with the Qing Dynasty to claim Taiwan as their territory, that the tribes started to band together to defend themselves. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, correct. No, you're
Yeah.
correct. You're correct. Don't worry, you got it. You got it.
And
So they
so
fought the Japanese at the very beginning when they first invaded in 1895.
yeah.
And then some time passes, right?
Mhm. Right, and oh god, I have to think back now. They do manage to to fight back for for some. They won a few battles, but not the war. They eventually uh, were kind of eradicated by the Japanese.
Yeah,
Uh,
that tribe in particular. So as Dan was saying, after these primary battles, the Japanese try to pacify or try to civilize, if I can use
mm,
that word, piss some people off. They try to civilize the Aboriginals, but it doesn't go well,
mhm,
obviously. And there comes to be a flashpoint, and the Aboriginals end up rebelling, and eventually, yeah, Japan ends up almost eradicating this tribe through conventional warfare, but they also actually used chemical warfare.
Mm,
They dropped bombs on them from the planes. I don't know if you remember from the film. They dropped gas,
right.
poison gas on them. Do you remember that?
Was that mustard gas?
I can't name it. I can't name the chemical for you. My memory's not that good,
Hmm.
but it could be. I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess we could briefly talk about because I'd be curious. Sometimes I like to draw parallels with Taiwan and the States. There's native peoples on both Taiwan and the States, and then there's the the
First
col-
Nations in Canada.
First Nations in Canada as well, and then there's the colonial powers that come and try to make that land their own. Um, but in Taiwan's case, there's kind of multiple colonial powers. At first, there was the Dutch, and then the
Right, the
Spanish,
Spanish. It
the
comes in waves,
Portuguese.
actually.
So there's not just one, right? And then
Yeah, several,
eventually
several.
eventually there was the Han Chinese that came
Right, Qing
300 years ago.
Dynasty.
300
Right.
years ago, you would say?
So, well, okay, so the Qing Dynasty showed up in the, if I'm not mistaken, in the late 1600s,
Hmm.
and they basically took power away from Ming Dynasty pirate general who had set up his own kingdom in the south here.
Hmm. And I guess they eventually warded off the European colonists. But how would you compare the Han Chinese interaction with the natives versus the Japanese?
Oh, that's fascinating. I love that you asked me that question because I recently had a very interesting conversation with uh, Taiwanese American, but when I say Taiwanese, he's actually Aboriginal.
Hmm.
His people are Atayal or Atayal, something like that. I'm probably mispronouncing that, so apologies to that community.
It's
I'm a
okay.
barbarian. Sorry, dudes. But anyway, I had a very interesting conversation with him, and I asked him a number of questions because, as me and Dan had been speaking about privately, it would be really cool to try to do some more history videos because one of the videos I did on my channel was about history.
Mhm.
And so I asked him a question like, as an Aboriginal person, how did each period was different, each wave was different, how did you interact? And the way the Aboriginals, the tribal people see it here, the worst of times for them was the Qing Dynasty times and their treatment by those Han Chinese.
Hmm.
And the best of times, you know, obviously apart from when they were on their own, right? That was the best
Right.
of times.
Right.
But apart from that, the best of times in the colonial era was actually the Japanese times, which is surprising, right? Because you think about this film and you think, well, wait a minute, they're chopping each other's heads off. How could that be the best of times?
Hmm.
But this is just a brief episode in the 50-year occupation of Taiwan by Japan. There was actually a lot of, I mean, this is flawed, but there's a lot of positives that came from that time. And there was actually a lot of things that were beneficial that came from that time. And yes, that's flawed, and people are, getting angry at me right now. But yeah, I'm saying that because it's true.
Yeah. So I guess we talked about well, I guess before we go any further, I have some. I guess I don't know if you would call them artifacts, but no, that
A
just
piece of
reached in,
culture
right?
from the Taiwanese Aboriginals.
Right. So I guess if we could
This
pull
is
up a
going to this is
picture,
going to be pretty cool, y'all. So
yeah.
just wait up.
Let me see if I can first, just to prove what I have is the real thing. I guess we can use.
Can you show us your just regular computer screen? Can you toggle back and forth?
Yep. Let me just do that right here.
Oh, look at you, dude. You're more savvy than me. I don't know shit.
So the blade that he's holding right here.
There we go. So on your right, there that's a warrior. That's an Aboriginal warrior, and on your
Yep.
left, that's an Imperial Japanese soldier, right?
Right. I guess if you this might
And
be
he was holding a saber, right?
yeah. Let's see.
And the Aboriginal warrior was holding like what would you call it, a dagger?
The one that I
Yeah, if you can just can you get that one back just for a moment? Just
yeah, let me just try to find it here.
Hang on, everybody.
Oh yeah, right here. I think, well, that's a sword. That's a pretty, well,
There we go. So he has a saber, the soldier does, right?
Yeah. And then this
And
is,
our warrior has what I would call a dagger.
yeah. So if I can, yeah, this dagger right here.
Yeah, there Muno Rudao has one too.
If I could maybe just enter. Whoops, sorry about that.
That's fine. Can you type in Chinese characters? You can try that.
Well, do you see this?
Oh, you got it? Okay.
Yeah, so I just typed in dagger. So this is what
wow,
they use.
There you go. I'll tell you all right there. That's even his tribe.
And if I toggle back to my screen here, oh, there we go. Yeah, that's
Damn,
right.
look at that.
This is a smaller one.
So can you hold it up to your arm? How big is that?
Okay, so
what size is that?
Hand for size. This is a smaller one, so I can grab it like this.
Okay, so it's about the size of your palm. The blade is.
If we put it like that, yeah,
a little bit larger, a little bit larger than
larger.
your palm. Okay.
And this is the sheath, of course. My dad was very fond of Aboriginal culture. He loves the outdoors and camping, and he knew. He actually worked with a bunch of Aboriginal people when he was in high school.
Really, they were coworkers of his.
There were, so I don't. Yeah, I told you he was a machinist. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I told you he was a machinist, and the company that he worked for, they were all Aboriginal peoples.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
And actually have an even bigger blade.
Damn, Dan has the weapons today, man. You going to war?
Look at that. So this is the impressive one.
Woo! Is that double the size of the other?
I'd say at least half the size.
Can you hold them up for comparison? Let's see.
Oh yeah.
Let's see that.
I gotta be careful here.
Don't hurt yourself.
Oh yeah, these are sheathed pretty good. So there.
Yeah, that's about half.
Yeah. If I do that.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
That's really, really cool.
And the thing about these blades, my dad got these, I think, in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Before he came to Vancouver.
Sure, because there's no way you get that on an airplane these days.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So
they call your dad a terrorist. He'd go to Guantanamo.
Yeah. Oh, geez, I don't want to imagine that, but yeah.
He'd be Harold and Kumar up in that shit.
Oh God, yeah. Jesus. But yeah, the smaller one belonged to my aunt, who is a professor in Aboriginal studies in Taiwan.
Yeah, right. Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that. She's very well versed. I hope someday she'll have a conversation with us on the podcast.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Even if it's not directly about just only that.
Yeah. And yeah, these I guess they were pretty open. I mean, I think they have a lot of these blades. Well, at least during the 80s, and I guess to make some money, they were offering it to people to,
souvenirs.
Right. Souvenirs, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna sheep them so I don't actually step on them.
Again, don't hurt yourself, pal.
Yeah.
That would be really bad. So you don't want to be like me. My recent family life has not been great, dudes. Part of the reason me and Dan have been on hiatus is because unfortunately my wife has broken both of her legs and is now wheelchair bound. So
is she feeling better now?
Yeah, so just to get a little personal for a second, everybody. She's doing good. She has 2 hard casts on her, both her right and left ankle. And so those will be on for the next 3 weeks. And we're just trucking along. It's hard, because not only am I doing my regular job, but now I'm also a housewife. So I have 2 jobs and I'm a little bit tired, but, we're making it work.
Does she get maternal leave?
No, that's only for that's when you have a baby.
Oh, right. No, what was
Maternity
I
leaves
thinking
when you
about?
when you
Right,
have a
right,
baby.
right. Yeah, sorry.
But if you're asking about healthcare, we do have NHI, right? We've spoken about that.
So yeah, nationalized health insurance,
Yeah, you got
NHI.
it. National
And
Health Insurance.
so how is the Taiwanese healthcare serving you in
Well,
this?
I mean, just to go back to the previous podcast, just briefly, I'm not
Yeah,
going to go too deep, but
right.
we got a bunch of bills. They were a lot.
Mm,
The hospital we went to, I'll just shout them out because they're a good hospital. It's McKay
mm,
Hospital. It's a Christian hospital in Danshui district in New Taipei City. They cut three bills at first. They gave them to us. They canceled those bills. They said, our primary concern is the patient and the patient's care and making sure she gets better. So, all right, wonderful, right? Christian hospital, bit of charity, right? And then we got revised bills, and they were much less. And then also, luckily, my mother-in-law, who used to work for the American company Texas Instruments,
mm.
also had a private supplementary insurance policy for her daughter that she had kept without me and my wife knowing. And we met with this insurance man, and so we might be getting a few thou back in a claim with them. So our final bill will be substantial, but much less than it originally was, and we'll be able to slowly work our way out of debt. Thanks God.
Right. Just curious, when you say Christian hospital, how does that work? Is it like funded by a church or?
Oh, yeah, good question, a fair question. I don't know what the funding is on that. They're connected with a church. The guy who founded it, George Leslie Mackay, was a Scottish Presbyterian missionary who
Hmm.
came to Taiwan in the 1890s and set up a university and a school and a hospital and everything. And so it comes from that. This hospital has a lot of history, actually.
The
The
1890s.
1890s, bro. The
Wow.
1890s, right?
Jeez.
He was here back in the day trying to bring Jesus to all the lovely people of Taiwan.
Right.
And that aside, he actually did a lot of great work because, like I said, to this day, we still have the university, we still have the hospitals, and
Hmm.
my wife is receiving very good care. So,
That's good. Yeah, well, just to connect that back to the Aboriginal people in Taiwan, my dad, uh, we have a restaurant here in Vancouver. It was the first Taiwanese restaurant in
really,
yeah, it was in the area
that's
for a
cool.
while.
Is it
Yeah,
on
and
the?
then
Is it on the sign? You got that on the sign?
oh no, we don't. My dad needs to. Yeah, he's a little
Damn, too
humble.
humble. Come on, son. You got
Yeah.
to brag a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there was like this other Taiwanese shop before us in Vancouver, but
Yeah,
it
but
didn't.
they're not legit. Like, obviously, come on.
No, we just well, they just had like beef noodle soup and just like basic dishes. Whereas we had like
Yeah, do you
we
like
had
that? I like me a very well prepared bowl of neuromian.
yeah. No, we have that too.
Yeah, is that one of
Um,
your favorites?
used to be. I'm trying to cut down on my meat intake, but
What's up with that? Health reasons?
health reasons. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. All right. Trying to live longer. I see.
Yeah. But anyway, so my dad told me that we had this table of customers. They were all white, right? And my mom went over to take their order, and they were basically, my mom attempted her English, which wasn't very good, and then they basically started speaking Taiwanese to us, which went
Wow. Okay.
wrong.
So clarify, not Mandarin,
Not Mandarin,
Taiwanese.
Taiwanese, which is also
Wow. How the
yeah,
hell did they do that?
right. And to clarify, just like Mandarin is from the mainland, Taiwanese is also from a province in China, but
Right. Although it's a separate dialect
it's a separate
from
dialect.
what you would hear in Fujian province. So,
Right. There's a bit of a different accent and terminology is a little
right.
different
So
too.
that's very specific. That's
Yeah.
fascinating. How did that happen?
So I'll tell you. So like they basically, I think they might have said like, so my mom would be attempting her English, and then they would have said something like, "Oh, buaging wagong dai," which I'm sure you might recognize
I
when you just heard that.
recognize.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's crazy.
And so the story was this family, they were a family of missionaries, and then they served in Taiwan.
Oh, okay,
And
were they Mormon or something, or
they must have been Mormon, right?
okay,
So what my dad told me was the reason why there were, I don't know if it's still the case, but there were a lot of Aboriginal peoples in Taiwan that eventually turned to either Christianity or Catholicism.
yeah, a lot of them are Presbyterian in particular,
Presbyterian, sure,
and
because
there's a fair number of Catholics, like you said, and nowadays there's a fair number of Mormons.
right, and that's largely due to, these missionaries who came to the mountains in, the Aboriginal people's homes, and they did donate a lot of, I guess, clothing, and they helped them, I guess,
Sure, sure.
help
And
them in a lot of
I
ways.
talked about this with that guy, Tony Coolidge, the
Mhm,
Taiwanese Aboriginal American guy, and he's kind of said the same thing. Like they come bearing gifts and
mhm,
things that we really need,
right.
and they just so happen to sprinkle some Jesus on top of it. So we kind of got to
Yeah,
take it. I mean, we need that stuff, you know.
right. And guess what? This kind of ties back to what that is. Soft power. That's
Right,
exactly what that
right.
is.
It's you catch more flies with honey than vinegar, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so they came bearing gifts, and I mean, it's not like these missionaries obviously believed in, the religion, and so they thought, of course, they were spreading what was good, and so, that's how that came to be. Um, but of course, our hopefully our vision of Taiwanese soft power, will be, let's just say, secular.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was gonna say, I mean, come now, you know me from all our interactions.
Yeah,
When I speak about soft power, I'm 100% secular. You know
yeah,
that. Like
no.
when I come with the culture, I come with the food and all that. I Religion is a personal matter. So you and everyone else believes what they want to believe, and I don't get involved with that. I don't push any kind of thing like that at all.
Mhm. So, what's another example of soft power that you'd like to see in Taiwan, or Taiwan
Yeah, well,
spreading?
so I mean, carrying on with the films, I obviously want to see more films. I want to
Right.
see them get into deeper issues. I want people to not be afraid to touch politics. I want them to not be afraid to touch war and complicated things, social issues. I don't. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with people who enjoy romantic films, but come on, you got to do more than that. You got to diversify a little bit, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm really quite sick of that. And I think that's why Taiwanese TV shows, not film, but TV shows fail to
Mm,
translate abroad is because it's all just soapy, sappy soap operas that are one love story after another about love triangles and cheating and bullshit.
yeah. Well, it's funny. Well, yeah, it's funny that you say that, because the one film that I remember watching, I guess it would have been 2008, 2009, a couple of years after its release, was Jay Chow's the movie that Jay Chow directed. I don't know if you know anything about
What's
that.
the title? What's the title of that?
Secret.
Okay.
S- Um, so I'm assuming you haven't checked it out.
No, but please introduce it. Tell us all about it.
Um, yeah, well, it's a bit of a drama, music, but I actually like it, and I've rewatched it last year, and I'm quite fond of it, actually. But it's not like,
Do you feel like that's the kind of movie that would play well with a foreign audience, or at least have a chance of playing well with a foreign audience?
not generally, only if they already kind of have an interest in Asian culture, I guess.
Yeah, damn right. Like you always got to have this like background layer. Like if you don't
Yeah.
have it, it's not going to work, right?
But if you're an open-minded person, I don't see why not. I mean, it also depends on what kind of movies you like to watch to begin with.
Okay, so I mean,
Um,
you'd have to be like probably fairly liberal, college educated, right?
oh, well, I don't even know if education has anything to do with it. Just an open
Well, the
mind.
reason I say that is just open mind, a little worldly, right?
Sure,
Being
sure,
able to look beyond just your town and your
right,
state or your province.
right. Yeah, I would hope that even people who haven't gone to college would take an interest in
Yeah,
other
I'm not trying
countries.
to put, like I'm not trying to be a dick and put them down, but I just,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like you have
I
to
know
have
what you mean.
a
Yeah.
broader outlook. And a lot of times when people go to university, that's part of what you're doing is you're getting a broader outlook.
Right. Oh, and sorry, I forgot to share what the cover.
Yeah, yeah, do that. We need to try to advertise better. So,
Yeah. So
all right,
I don't
that's a
know
nice
how.
design.
Yeah, I don't know how you watch films in Taiwan, but maybe you can
Well,
check
to
that
be honest with you, Dan, I don't usually watch films at all, but
out. Okay.
that's because I have two young children and I don't have
Right.
disposable income. But
Right.
and it
Right.
has nothing to do with my choices of movie or anything genre related.
I see. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of many Chinese sites that people use in Taiwan to watch movies for
Yeah,
free.
well, actually, now that you bring that up, we were obviously late to the game, like we always are, and everything. But we
Mm.
have Netflix here.
Oh, right. Oh, it's on Netflix, I think.
Yeah, we have Netflix here. It's a thing. You can be on Taiwanese Netflix now.
Yeah, I don't think they have that in
Obviously, we
China.
carry a different catalog than what they carry in US, Canada, but we
Yeah.
have Netflix here.
Do you personally have it at home?
Again, Dan, I don't have disposable income.
Right, right. Gotcha, gotcha.
My wife's in a wheelchair, buddy. I mean,
Right.
come on
Yeah,
now.
yeah. I wonder how much it costs in Taiwan. Would it
It's probably
this
what?
roughly
It's
the
probably
same,
the
right?
equivalent of like $5.
And
You
a
know?
$5 a month? Yeah. I guess
Yeah,
you
think about it. Think about $5 Canadian, $5 or $6 Canadian a month.
or US, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, roughly. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
It's trivial, right?
It would have to be cheap enough for people to use in
Yeah,
Taiwan.
or they wouldn't do it at all. They would just
Yeah.
pirate the movies. So,
Yeah. As is very common in Asia.
yes, yeah, people know how to do that very well here.
Yeah.
So, okay, so some more films I want to bring up, and actually, this next one I want to bring up is a movie that I have not seen that I really want to see, but Dan has seen it, and so I'm
Hmm.
hoping Dan will be able to speak about it in a decent length. This is called Kano. This
Yeah.
is a movie about baseball, but it's also got a historical setting, and I think this would also be called historical fiction because
Yeah.
there are real events that are tied to this. And yeah, someday in the future, I hope to see this, but I'm going to throw it over to Dan because he actually has.
Yeah, it's actually been quite a while since I saw it, and I'm just showing you. Yeah, I'm gonna mute it, but it's a trailer of it, so we don't get copyright claims. Hopefully, we don't. Um, but it's I forgot what area exactly it was, but it would have been during the Japanese occupation in Taiwan, and I
Are you
guess.
there? Are you there, dude? I can't quite see your video. Or oh, you're just setting it up? Okay.
Did you see the video?
Yeah. Okay. Now I do. Now I do.
Okay. So yeah, it would have been during the area of Japanese occupation, and there's you can tell that there is a hierarchy of citizenship. You know, the Japanese are number one, the Han are kind of number two, and then the natives are kind of number three. And there's this Japanese coach that is um, taking an interest in assembling a team of his own in Taiwan. And like I don't know if you caught it on the trailer. He said the natives are very quick on their feet. The Hans are really heavy batters, and the Japanese are really good catchers.
Hmm.
This
Hmm.
diverse
Big
talent is.
stereotypes.
Yeah, yeah, ethnic stereotypes. I mean, it was kind of inspiring, but yeah, I understand what you're saying. But
Just
it's
remember how racist everyone was back then.
yeah, yeah. But it's a nice historical piece too. Um,
There
it,
actually was a baseball team like that back in the day, wasn't there? I mean, it's based upon a true story. Am I right? I'm
to
I'm
be honest,
almost
I
certain
couldn't tell
that's
you.
true.
Yeah, I'm just looking at this trailer now. It's a shame that my grandmother, whose education and elementary education was Japanese because she was born in that era. It's a shame that she didn't get to see this film because she passed. before this film came out. Should
Damn,
have
what a
loved it,
bummer,
I
dude.
think.
I think she probably would have liked it a lot, huh?
Yeah. And so I guess we can use my grandmother as an example of what a type of person uh, in Taiwan might be like. So my grandmother was born and raised in Taiwan, and her
She
first
saw many different periods of Taiwan, right?
oh yes, so
Because
she was
when she was she born in the Japanese era? Is
yeah,
that right?
so right, so she was born in 1932.
Okay, as a colonial subject of Japan.
Right. So, she would have been a descendant of the Hans, but her first language was
Hoklo?
Taiwanese, Oko Taiwanese,
Hmm.
because that's what they spoke in Taiwan generally. And because of the Japanese occupation, her education in elementary school was Japanese.
Right, so she would have been learning like katakana and all that stuff. And
Right. And so actually during this time, her siblings told me that because she was the eldest in the family out of 8 siblings, and her siblings actually told me that they did have to like duck under tables because there were bombs dropping from the U.S. because it was during World War II.
that's
It was
true.
It was
The American
Japanese,
military did actually do some bombings. Actually, Taipei was bombed
right?
during World War II
Because there
because
was
Taiwan was a Japanese military base, pretty
yep,
much.
yeah. So World War II, and I guess after World War II, when the Japanese kind of had to leave.
Right, they surrendered. The KMT comes in.
Right, but yeah. So yes, and during this time, I think there were also I saw a documentary. American troops came to Taiwan to kind of train them in their own self defense. I think they might have been training the KMT too to defend themselves from the PRC. I'm not quite sure, but during this time, I think it was during this time when some missionaries began to come to the island as well. And I think this is when my grandmother babysat for this Catholic priest. I wasn't sure if it was a Catholic, but it was, under the umbrella of Christianity. And that's when she started to learn English. And to my surprise, she learned English before Mandarin, and she only learned Mandarin because she was introduced to a mainland Chinese person.
Right. Right.
And
See, that's something that I think most people don't know. If you come to Taiwan today, it's almost all Mandarin
yeah,
Chinese. But
yeah,
you got to understand that's an imported that's an imposed language. That's not a native language here.
yeah. And that's something that I guess it was always like a naive, assumption that I had because I wasn't educated on this, but I always assumed that people did speak Taiwanese 100 years ago in Taiwan, where that's not the case. It was an import. These other, languages that came from even though it came from mainland China, like Hakka and Taiwanese, Mandarin wasn't the dominant one 100 years ago.
No, no. When the KMT showed up here, right, one of the first things they did was to begin to impose the spoken language of Mandarin. And if you were imagine you were a young schoolboy or a young schoolgirl, and you're going to school, Guoshao or Guozhong or whatever. If they caught you speaking Hakka or an Aboriginal language or Hoklo, you would be punished. You would be beaten. You would be whipped, right?
Hmm.
And so that was like part of the way that they imposed the language was to like beat you and shame you and have your classmates inform on you and write secret reports about you.
Right. Well,
Fear, basically.
yeah. And I guess to you know growing up here, the stories that I've heard, and it's interesting that to hear your perspective and some of what the stories that I've heard, and some of them do match. So when my dad went to school, you had to speak Mandarin in public school, right? Well,
Mm.
even though there are a ton of private schools in Taiwan, it was just all you had to speak Mandarin
Yeah,
at
not
school,
optional. You have to.
right? And so, but the thing was, out of I think in Taiwan, a classroom instead of 30 kids in a classroom like they are in in Canada and the States. It was actually it's 50 students in a classroom. I don't know if that's still the case.
Yeah, things have changed.
Okay. So back then it was 50 kids in a classroom, and the after the KMT came to Taiwan, there was plots of small land that they reserved for the veterans in the KMT, and that's where my grandfather lived and kind of raised their
Yeah, military veterans villages, they call them.
right. And that's actually where you had all these different Chinese people in the same village, and so my dad grew up. You know, my grandfather came from the province of Jiangsu,
Mm.
and my dad would grow up, growing up with all these different Chinese people from like Szechuan and all
From
these different.
everywhere, right? It's interesting. You get like a kind of salad bowl mix of all kinds of different people.
Yeah, and so that's kind of one of the reasons why he can actually speak a bit of, he knows a bit of uh Szechuanese and
Yeah,
Shanghainese, and
he's got a little bit of the dialects, different dialects in there.
yeah, just a little bit because that's what he
Hmm.
grew up with. And funny enough, he told me that because the way that these mainlanders speak Chinese, they have a really heavy accent.
They can.
They can. And you'd add that on top of growing up with, because each province in China also speaks Mandarin with a different accent. He grew up with many different provinces.
Hmm.
And so when he first spoke uh, Chinese, he had a really, really funny accent. Of course, that, eventually,
Softened.
softened.
Yeah.
But when he went to school in Taiwan, there would be 50 kids in a classroom. Four of them would be kids of, Wyesendra and KMT descent, so to
Right.
speak.
So mainland refugees, just to put
Right,
it in an English term that we can understand.
right. And so, during the day, you had to speak Chinese at school, but after school, these four kids, my dad being one of them, would get beat up by the other kids because they were seen as, oh, they're the KMT kids, and they're the mainland Chinese kids, and they don't understand Taiwanese. And my dad didn't understand Taiwanese, and they would actually get beat up by the kids. Maybe, and I would imagine, after what I've learned about the 228 massacre, maybe it's because these kids, know about this, and their parents kind of did, tell them about the awful things of the KMT, that they kind of directed their
Yeah. Yeah.
anger.
You think about it. There were certainly people here, even during those times, who would have probably kept to themselves for the most part, but in their heads, they were probably thinking like, "We're never going to get along with these people. I still hate them. I still hold a grudge."
Yeah. So it's interesting, to hear, because growing up and hearing those stories, hearing my dad's story of, how the four of, I guess the three of their small group of friends, the four people that were, beaten up after school because they weren't Taiwanese enough, even though they were born in Taiwan. One of my grandmother, my dad's mom, was born and raised in Taiwan. You couldn't get more Taiwanese than my grandmother, merely because his father was a KMT, officer. They got discriminated against, and that's kind of the side of the story that I sort of understood. And so, it's interesting to hear the other side as
Hmm.
well.
It's an
So
immigrant story, right?
yeah, and I guess because I only grew up with this side of the story, I've always thought that, oh, it's those green people that were always, close-minded and unaccepting of the blue people, and
Yeah,
and
right. Because you only, like you said, you only got half
yeah,
of the story. You got 50%, right? Like
yeah,
you didn't hear their side and all the bad things that happened to them, you know.
yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of nuance to be talked
It's
about.
it's complicated. It's
Yeah,
certainly complicated, isn't it?
yeah.
Okay, so the next film I want to bring up, and this one kind of is also it's an immigrant story. So this is a very special film. I have not seen. I don't think Dan has seen it either. Have you seen this
No,
one, Dan?
is animated film?
Yes, it's actually one of the very. This is very special. because I think this is like one of only maybe like two Taiwanese animated films, feature-length animated films. And so the English title is On Happiness Road, and that's literally what it says on in Chinese as well, Happiness Road. And so basically the story is that this little girl here grows up into this woman here, and she moves to America, and she becomes an immigrant, and it's all about her life, and all about how things are different, and about how you keep an open mind, and you know, it's something I really want to see, because it's so rare, because it's an animated film, because it's an immigrant story. She has dreams. She's a lot more open-minded than the other kids that she probably grows up with. She's special, you know. And the immigrant story, because I kind of feel, I mean, I kind of myself am an immigrant here, even though I think a lot of people would not like me saying that. And then, you know, I think, Dan, well, you come from an immigrant family, so I think maybe this film would maybe resonate with you too. I'm not sure.
Interesting.
What do you think of it so far?
I'm looking at the trailer. I'm muted, of course.
Right.
But,
Yeah, we don't want to get dinged.
yeah. Yeah, I'll check it out. See if oh, interesting. I know. Well, I recognize. Oh, I guess the person who sang the theme of the
Jolene,
song.
right?
Yeah, Jolene Tai. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, I think it's a cute movie. I really want Taiwanese animation to be a thing. I really want Taiwan to work on that. It kind of bothers me that in TV here, when my little boys are watching cartoons, that none of the cartoons are their own. Like they're all imported. They're American cartoons. They're Japanese cartoons. Or we even have like some Korean and Chinese cartoons. But there's no cartoons that come from them, right? There's no Taiwanese cartoons telling the stories of, you know, young Taiwanese kids.
Yeah, it's interesting. You definitely hear. I mean, growing up, again, even though I was born and raised here, I did go back and I did see a lot of Japanese animation in Taiwan, and
Right, I can name several. Doraemon, you
yeah,
know.
that's the one. That's the
Okay,
one. Yeah,
Dragon Ball Z used to be
yeah,
big.
yeah. The
What else do
Gundam
we have? We
series.
have Sailor Moon used to be
Oh
really
yeah,
big.
yeah, yeah.
Help me out here. What else we got?
There's the Gundam series.
Yeah, right. That used to be pretty big.
Yeah, they actually
There's several.
mentioned
There's a lot.
they've actually mentioned Taiwan in an episode in Gundam.
Yeah,
The
really.
the
Okay.
first episode, I can't remember which Gundam it was, but I think it was just Gundam Seed. There was something, some mention of, oh, there's a rat infection going on in Taiwan, and they're trying they're trying to make like this.
That's
I
a
don't know.
terrible reference.
Yeah, I don't know.
That
They're
doesn't help
trying
at
to.
all. We're ruining the soft power.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Don't go to Taiwan, folks. There's rats everywhere.
It was supposed to be some global disaster or whatever it was, but
Oh, great.
Thank
you, Gundam.
To be honest, I was just grateful that they mentioned it because honestly, you just don't hear Taiwan being referenced outside of Taiwan.
Yeah, that's such a bummer. Like, yeah, back to what I said. I think it's just a shame that there aren't more movies like this, you know. And that kind of leads me to the next one. So there's one more animated film, and this is the original like Taiwanese animated film. I think it might have been the first Taiwanese feature-length animated film. This is called Grandma and Her Ghosts in English, and in Taiwanese it's or excuse me, in Chinese it's something ama something.
Mofa, I think.
Yeah, Ghost, Grandma's Ghost or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Anyway, I've seen bits and pieces of it. I've never seen the entire film. I'd be interested to see that. And I don't know, Dan, have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
You might want to check that one out.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. I think the grandma, I think she dies, and then I think her granddaughter is like dealing with her ghosts or something like that. Or it's something like that. It's a cute film. My wife tried to get me to watch it, and I only saw bits and pieces of it. But I want to revisit that. And yeah, like I said, it bothers me that we don't have Taiwanese people telling their stories in the in the realm of animation, whether it be on TV or in movies, right? Like, why do my sons need to watch Labi Xiaoxin? Why can't they watch some Taiwanese school kid shaking his ass?
So 3 things that I want to
Do you
bring
know
up.
what I'm talking about?
Yeah, for
With
sure.
Labi Xiaoxin shaking his butt?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
When I was watching it, I was too young to understand the dirty references, but
Oh, he's such a perv.
yeah.
I like watching that show because he's so perverted.
But three things that I want to bring up. I don't know if I'll remember all 3, but the last time I went to Taiwan in 2015, I was talking to these Taiwanese people that were I think 4 or 5 years older than me, and one was a nurse and one was a computer engineer or software engineer. And I asked them, because at the time I was not heavily considering, but I was just uh, thinking about, oh, what if I stayed here and studied here for a
Really?
change?
You played with that idea briefly?
Very, very briefly. And I asked them, are there any film schools in Taiwan? And they couldn't think of any. And then what they actually responded to me was, we we'd only have training for things that really matter, like things that matter, things that
Don't
matter.
you hate that? I just hate that. Like,
But what she meant was things that matter immediately, like factories
yeah,
and like
I
just like,
understand. I know exactly what she means. She
yeah,
means doctor, lawyer, engineer.
yeah, just things
The
that,
important things, the people who matter.
yeah. Yeah, so I was like, oh, okay, interesting, that's an interesting mindset. And
Uh,
back to what you were saying about how you were you were being your disappointment of how Taiwan has to import Japanese cars, Japanese cartoons, and
it makes me sad because there are people here who are talented and they have stories to tell, but they're not being told.
right. My dad was actually telling me why one of the big reasons why Korea went from being underneath Taiwan in terms of the
Oh, as one of
economy.
the Asian tigers.
Well, yeah, they went from he told me back in their day, they, not necessarily in a negative way, but they would see Japanese as above them and the Koreans
Hmm.
below them. In terms
Leftover
of
colonial mindset.
uh, well, in terms of how economically powerful they were. Japan was ahead of them, and Korea was
Right. The
still very much.
Japanese, they look up to them because they've always been above them. They have always had more money, more power. They used to be the colonial power. Same in Korea, actually. Korea was a Japanese colony as
Right,
well. So
right,
it doesn't surprise me that they look at them that way.
right. But then my dad's point was how the Koreans went from being below Taiwan in that perspective to now being way past Taiwan
Oh, yeah.
was
Korea is a
they have
powerhouse.
they have Samsung and they have Hyundai. They have that now. They have their own electric cars. They have
They
what's the
have
other one?
phones, dude. Samsung phones.
Samsung phones, the
Right there.
Hyundai cars,
K-pop, K-dramas have exploded, super popular.
things that are popular outside of Taiwan, or sorry, outside of
Exactly.
Korea.
And just to pile on, Korean cuisine has
Right.
exploded in a way that Taiwanese cuisine hasn't even come close to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and again, I think that when a lot of people, wonder about Taiwanese cuisine, they'll just assume, oh, it's just probably a branch of Chinese cuisine, right?
Which is unfair because you're just kind of minimizing it. Like you're not giving it its due, right?
Yeah. We've had Chinese customers um, that have come in for the first time, and then they'll say, with their heavy Chinese accent, "Oh, what kind of food do you have here?" And now, even though that
I
was
love
a
how you did that.
yeah,
Even in English, you put an R on that.
yeah,
Like, oh, how you doing here? I really
yeah,
like your
yeah.
food.
Well, just with this really cocky
I love that. I love that. Even when you speak English, you're doing it with a Chinese accent.
you know exactly what I mean. But
I know what you the heavy Beijing R.
you know
Saynar.
yeah,
Nar,
yeah.
nar, nar.
But they came in with this really cocky attitude, like, "Oh, what kind of food you guys have
Oh my
here?"
lord, that's so hilarious.
And then my mom would say, "Oh, we have some very special Taiwanese cuisine," and they'd
Hmm.
be very explicitly like Taiwanese cuisine. Okay, sure.
Okay, but so hold on. If I'm your mom, I'm like, wait a minute, sit down, give it a try. Let's see.
Well, yeah, I guess how she responded, she didn't really say much. It was just like, "Oh, they're the customer. I shouldn't say anything," like that. She kind of like went
Yeah, I
drew
know the
back a
customer's
little
always
bit.
right attitude.
Yeah, so she couldn't really talk back in that sense. But
I'd be kind of frustrated though. I'd be like, wait a minute, you gotta try it before you talk shit. Like,
yeah, you know, I remember I was sitting down at one of the tables, and there's this Chinese couple, and you could really tell that this Chinese guy was trying to impress the Chinese girl with his knowledge or whatever it was, and he said out loud like, "Oh, those Taiwanese people, the way that they do things is just like, oh, they just the way that they like work, their work ethic, their way that they do things is just awful." And I was just sitting there, just like, wow, like
yeah, shaking your head, right?
there is, I mean, to be fair, like a lot of Taiwanese people are also bigoted towards the mainland Chinese. It's just sad that there's
Yeah,
that
it's funny, right? That you would bring that up during, I guess, what were they on a date or something?
yeah, he was just trying to be macho and be like, I know this about the Taiwanese
Ugh, God,
people.
I hate that kind of attitude, that kind of machismo bullshit.
Yeah.
No, I do. That shit bugs me. It's like, oh, you look at me. I'm a big, strong dude. Okay, shut up, dude. All right, we got it.
Yeah. But did you know that there is a Taiwanese company that is electric car startup?
I did not. I'm not surprised though, given the fact that we have the scooter
Hmm.
Gogoro, the
Yeah.
famous electric scooter Gogoro,
Yeah.
comes from here, and they have been exploding in popularity.
Yeah.
There's a convenience store not too far from my house that has a charging station.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, they're called Thunder Power, which I always think that the Taiwanese people can use a
that's
better.
cool. Although I'd say, come on, bros, it's not the '80s anymore. You kind of got to
Yeah,
update, but
yeah. I always think, oh man, like the Taiwanese and the Chinese, like sometimes when they attempt at
in many
English.
ways, bro, we're stuck in the '80s and the '90s. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I kind of hope that this Taiwanese car startup can be a success story, but I
but
haven't.
do you see that as soft power as well? I mean, the fact that well, think about American cars, Korean cars, Japanese cars. Is that also a form of soft power? Do you think? Do you think that's true?
Well, at the very least, you can bring it up in discussion, right? Oh, it's the Japanese car. The Japanese do this. They're really good with minimalist design or whatever. And
Right, and you can name several, right? Mitsubishi,
oh, you can
right?
make a lot. And at the
Honda,
right, Honda, Toyota,
right?
Nissan,
It
all
goes
of
on,
that.
yeah, it goes on and on, right? So that's
It
part of
goes,
the soft power,
and that at the very least just brings the discussion. It gets you to even mention Japanese, you
right?
know, and the
Right.
Koreans with their Hyundai, the Germans and their whatever it is,
BMWs,
BMWs and
Volkswagen,
Audis, Volkswagen, Mercedes, and all that.
sure, yeah, on and on, yeah.
So if there was a successful Taiwanese car in the States, they'd be like, "Oh, it's a Taiwanese car.
It
Oh,
would be good. It would raise the profile, right?
yeah." And they would be like, "Oh, Taiwanese? Where is that? What is that? What's the history there? I've never really heard of that." And oh, and if it's a good car, they'd be like, "Huh, I actually want to do
There you
maybe."
go. It could be a bridge into
Yeah,
like, oh, I'll check that out. Maybe I'll do a Google search, and I'm a
yeah,
little curious, like, where
yeah.
does this come from?
That's where it starts, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So hopefully, I haven't. They're actually going to debut, I think, their car in Europe first. I can't remember when.
Really? Why would they do that though? Why wouldn't they do it homegrown, like a homegrown event?
I don't know. They might. I don't know if they will actually, but I I I did frequently comment on their Instagram posts, and they occasionally get back to me. So
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
because they don't really have that big of an audience yet.
Okay, well,
So
hey, you shoot me a link later so I
yeah,
can
I
start
will.
following these dudes, and I'll
Absolutely,
pester them too. Um,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
I'll start bothering them. Like, come on, get it
yeah,
together, dudes.
yeah. Yeah. So
It's good. All right, so more films. Do you have any more? Because I have three more that I'd like to name.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, so here's, I'll leave the heavy one for the last one. Here's one that me and Dan had like a slight little, I don't know, we weren't debating. We were just kind of like going back and forth about it a little bit. So this was probably one of the first, no, not the first, maybe the second or the third ever film that I saw that was in Mandarin Chinese. And this was one of the first movies that I saw in cinemas in Taiwan. And it's called Black and White, The Dawn of Justice, if I remember right. Is it The Dawn of Justice? Yeah, The Dawn of Justice. And yeah, it's cool. It's just a fun summertime action movie. I really enjoyed it as my first Mandarin Chinese film, seeing it in cinemas with my wife. It was fun. Like, obviously not the greatest movie ever. It's not going to win any Oscars, but yeah, if you're looking for a bit of fun, some explosions, some car chases, maybe a laugh here or there, yeah, check it out. So I'll throw it over to Dan.
Yeah, I briefly remember watching it.
Did you? You actually saw it? I thought you didn't see it.
No, I saw it. I saw it. It was a long
time
ago.
Or did you see the first one? Because that's a sequel, actually. I think that's a sequel.
I think I saw both, I think.
Did you?
Yeah, I think I did. I think I did. I think I did. I mean, off the top of my head, no, you know what? I did, because I remember the sequel.
Okay.
Where, you know, the protagonist was like, "Oh, you again," you know, from the prequels, like, "Ah, you again, you're a criminal," or whatnot. So
So just to clarify, just a brief thing, it's about two cops. They're like police officers. It's set in a fictional city, but to be honest, the way they filmed it, like, you pretty much get the sense that the city is Kaohsiung. It's obvious because they use the city of Kaohsiung and the skyline. It's freaking obvious that they're shooting it there. And there's this bad guy, and he's like a big time kind of like terrorist dude, and he does bombings and highway tunnels and stuff. And yeah, it gets pretty serious, right? They're threatening to kill the girl that he likes, and like I said, it's an action movie. Think like a James Bond type of thing, like a Taiwanese kind of James Bond, like a cop kind of a movie, like maybe Die Hard meets James Bond in Kaohsiung, you know, maybe.
Yeah, it's there's.
Is that fair? Do you agree with me?
I'm gonna disappoint.
Help me out here. Help me out here. I'm kind of bumbling.
I feel like there is a American equivalent, but well, the premise is kind of where there's a cop and a criminal, and they, the cop despises criminals, and the criminal despises cops, and they kind of have to work together, and their assumptions on each other kind of get blurred, and I feel like there's an American equivalent to that, but I can't name one off the top of my head.
Okay, all right. Yeah. But like a cop movie, basically.
A cop movie partnering with a criminal, kind of.
Yeah, thing. So a cop who has to make compromise, right? Like a renegade cop or something.
Yeah, and I think I remember the criminal being like, "Oh, I would never ever, work with a cop," and he eventually does. And I remember one of them being mainland Chinese, and I do remember the banter.
Really? Okay, I don't recall that, because I think that must have been in the original one, because the one I saw, I don't remember there being a mainlander in that.
Okay. Well, I don't know if it was the prequel or the sequel.
That must have been the prequel, bro. I don't remember that.
Oh, did you only see the sequel?
Yeah, I haven't seen. I should have clarified. I'm sorry. I only saw that one. I only saw The Dawn of Justice. I did not see the other one.
Okay, yeah. I feel like
I probably should, though, to clarify. Like,
I feel like
the story.
Yeah, I just remember banter between the Taiwanese and the Chinese. So yeah.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
They would put those two together.
Yeah.
I hate you too. Oh, we have to work together. No choice.
Oh yeah, there's no political undertones there.
Yeah. Oh, not at all. Not at all. Right? Didn't you tell me the production company was actually a mainland company?
Yeah, they worked with the Chinese company, I think.
Well, see, there you go. There are, as Chris Chappell of China Uncensored puts it, there are definitely political undertones in movies these days because of
Oh
Chinese
yeah.
pressure, right?
Yep.
Can't pretend that doesn't exist.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so next one. We're gonna move on. We're going to gangster movies, right? Everybody loves a good gangster movie. I like The Godfather. I love Goodfellas. Have you ever seen Goodfellas?
I have not.
You have not seen Goodfellas?
I have not. There's a lot of classics that I've yet
How
to
about A
see.
Bronx Tale? Have you seen A Bronx Tale?
I have not.
Dan. You got to see. Okay, so two gangster movies I want Dan to watch.
Yeah.
I want you to watch Goodfellas, and I want you to watch A Bronx Tale. Right?
Bronze Tale. Okay,
Yeah. You watch some New York or like Boston, Italian American mafioso guys, cracking baseball bats over each other's heads, stabbing each other, doing lines of cocaine.
Gotcha. All right.
I recommend. Anyway, okay, so there's a Taiwanese gangster movie. It's a very famous Taiwanese gangster movie. Here it is right here. I'm not sure if Dan has seen this one.
I've seen it.
It's called Manga. It's interesting. It kind of ties into what Dan was talking about with his father.
Yeah.
Is because, and let me explain why. That might not be apparent to everyone. So what Dan was saying was when the mainlanders came over here, a lot of times they would be discriminated against and they would be bullied at school because of their accent or this and that. And he's playing the trailer right now.
Yeah. Please go ahead. Go on.
Anyway, so they would be discriminated against, and the way that they dealt with that was to form gangs. They would form street gangs, and eventually they would band together and become even stronger. They would become like triads, like organized crime. Yeah. And so basically that's kind of what happens with some of these characters is they're bullied in school and they band together and they form gangs. And yeah, it's a gangster movie. You have the characters eventually getting into fights with rival gangs. Some of the guys lose their lives. There's, of course, it's a Taiwanese movie, so there has to be a love interest. The girl with the burned face, she's thrown in there as well. And it's a good film. I really enjoyed it. I think it'll give people who knew about Taiwan in the 70s and 80s nostalgia. I think that would come out. That obviously doesn't affect me, but maybe someone like Dan's father would appreciate that. And I'll throw it over to Dan. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I definitely. It's you again, like we talked about before. I'm not a fan of censorship and shying away from harsh topics, and this is definitely one of those harsh topics.
You mean organized crime?
Organized crime, all of it. Just the mafia in Taiwan, and
right?
All that.
Prostitution, people getting hurt.
Yeah, my dad grew up in one of. You know what? Actually, I don't know why I didn't mention this earlier. He grew up in this neighborhood.
Really?
Yeah, he grew up in this neighborhood.
Really? Name it. What was the district he grew up in?
Well, Manga, which is the name of the film.
Wanhua, right?
Wanhua, yeah.
Yeah, Wanhua, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a very old part of Taipei. That's actually probably to this day. There's probably street gangs there.
Oh, I'm sure. It was that neighborhood. It was known to be, the dirtiest neighborhood where there was a lot of crime and a lot of street thugs.
You see them there. They're fighting in Snake Alley. I've actually done a video there.
Yeah. My dad did, talked about, how sometimes, if he's like up on his apartment, he would just see people just fighting for no good reason on the street.
Yeah, like kicking the shit out of each other, right?
Yeah, for no good reason. And he grew up in that neighborhood, and because he grew up in this neighborhood, he became gang capable. He never joined anything, but he was
okay. So he was never actually a part of a street gang.
No.
But he knew how. I assume he knew how to fight and defend himself.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, yeah, definitely. Like in the beginning, it was because the Taiwanese people, and I'll just remove. I'll show my face there.
Did he carry? I mean, was he always kind of worried? Like, did he carry a blade with him wherever he went, just in case?
Um, that I don't think he did that. I mean,
Like how bad was the bullying? Like did he feel like he had to go with friends everywhere? Did he carry a knife in his pocket or something? Or
so I don't think he. I don't know if he ever carried a weapon with him, but because you know, my grandfather was like the dictator of his life. And so if he did anything like that,
he probably
he
would have got punished.
yeah, like I said, like my dad oh, I don't know if I told you, my dad got stabbed once.
Not on air, bro. You never said that on air.
Okay,
Actually, we talked briefly about that stuff, but not on
right.
air.
Okay, so my dad would be going to school, and I guess the route that there was this kid that took the same route to school, and he would see him, every other day or every day. And this kid, I guess, had some conflict
There was
with,
beef, right?
there was beef with some other people, and my dad just so happened to be there, and so he kind of tried to defend him a little bit. And when he turned around, this kid kind of just booked it, and so he was alone, and these guys kind of just stabbed.
Wow, I just took off and left him there.
It was, I guess, it was really intimidating, right? Or whatever excuse that he wants to
Yeah,
use.
I guess.
But he got stabbed, my dad,
Where did
on
he
the
take it? In the chest?
right lung from the back. Or I don't know, I forgot if it was from the, yeah, it was from the back, and it made a mark to the front.
Ooh, wow, it went all the way through.
I think it went all the way through, and you can still see the mark today.
Mm.
And I guess after he got stabbed, he couldn't really do anything about it, and he went to school, and I guess he tried to,
Remind
wrap
me
him.
again, did he puncture a lung? I mean, how bad was it?
He ended up in the hospital. Um, I couldn't tell you the details. I could ask him, but so
Okay.
he was in the classroom. He kind of wrapped himself up. He didn't think too much of it. I mean, society was so strict at that time.
Yeah,
He
I
didn't.
don't think I would say he didn't think too much of it. Obviously, he thought a lot about it, but
Right. I guess.
he wouldn't have showed that to the outside world.
Yeah, and so society was so strict at that time. Like he thought that I have to go to school, otherwise I'm going to get in trouble. So he did that, and the guy sitting next to him was very much aware of these things, and he kept pinching my dad because if he fell asleep, he might have died because he was bleeding out.
Oof, God,
And
that's
so
wild.
he ended up in the hospital. And when my grandparents came to the hospital, my grandfather just started
Wailing
beating
on
him
him,
up because his mindset was, how dare you get in a fight at
even
school,
though he's been so heavily injured, right?
yeah. And he was just like, the nurses and my grandmother were just like, what are you doing? He's good. Like,
God, you're gonna kill him. Like, you gotta
yeah,
stop. Like,
yeah. It was rough back then. It
oh
was
yeah,
rough.
no kidding. But this is the
Yeah.
world of those guys. This is where this film is set, right? That's exactly
Yeah.
the route that these characters would have taken. And I wonder, has your father seen the film?
Yeah. You know what he told me,
I wonder what he
actually?
think. What does he think of it? What does he make of the film?
He actually told me that what the film didn't cover the bad parts of what happened in that district, which was surprising to me because you think
Yeah,
that
because what happens in the film is pretty brutal. But
pretty brutal, and you'd think that it'd be a film, not reality, that exaggerates what happened.
sure, sure.
Usually it's the film that exaggerates, but my dad said that wasn't the half of it. So
Oh, good God, right?
yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, we have to make it clear it's not as bad as it was before. So, if Taiwan is a safe place.
Yeah. Oh,
I'll,
yeah. No, definitely, definitely. Look, like I said, I've made some vlogs in that area. It's not like that anymore. It's a
yeah,
tourist area.
yeah,
The famous Longshan Temple is there. Go there and eat
yeah.
snacks. It's yummy. It's fun.
Don't get the wrong idea. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
It's been cleaned up a lot, and
yeah,
yeah, people should watch that vlog, and you should not worry because nowadays violent crime in Taiwan is very rare. So
yeah. All right, what's the last film that you have?
okay, so final film, and I think this is the one that's going to have the most impact, and I think it's going to be the most controversial, and it's this one, and it's probably the only one of its kind. This is called The City of Sadness.
Interesting.
And this movie is probably the only one that exists that deals with the topic of the February 28th massacre, the 228 massacre. And basically, the film opens and it's the Japanese are decolonizing. They are leaving Taiwan. The KMT are taking over. Mainlanders are showing up. Things are getting tense. You know, there's rivalries here and there. Tensions are simmering. And eventually, boom, 228 massacre happens. People start getting rounded up. People are running and hiding in the mountains so they don't get caught by the nationalist army and they don't get executed or dumped in the ocean with their hands tied behind their back, right? And yeah, you follow this family in this tiny little village that is set in New Taipei City nowadays. At the time, it would have been Taipei County, I guess. But you just watch this little village and this family get torn apart. Like one by one, these people just have their lives ruined, you know, absolutely ruined by this event. And I think this is really extraordinary because I think this film came out when I was a baby. I think it came out in either 88, 89, or 90.
89.
89. So it's as old as I am. And you got to remember that the regime, the dictatorship only kind of ended, it ended in steps, but the beginning of the end was 87. So that's extraordinary. You think 2 years later, we're already, you know, we're already touching and broadcasting to the world the most sensitive topic in this entire country for the last 40 years.
Right.
Incredible, right? I mean, it's almost unbelievable that they had the balls to do that.
I wonder how, because it would have taken, I don't know, at least 5 months to make the film. So they would have started to make it in 1988 or even earlier, 1987, just to
yeah. I
prep for
don't
it.
know how they did that. I don't know how they justified that or the lies that they told to try and get permission to do the filming and everything.
Yeah.
But it's incredible. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that one out.
Yeah, so I urge everyone to watch that. Pay attention. It's a very complicated film. The relationship between the families and the characters is really complicated. If you leave to go to the bathroom or if you leave to go make popcorn or some shit like that, you're going to miss a lot. So you need to really pay attention. There's a lot of detail. It's a high context movie. So, you know, really, really pay attention. But it's a very rich movie. It's really beautifully shot. They filmed part of it in a very famous area now. It's called Jiufen, which is this kind of famous seaside village on the north coast of Taiwan, where they have a lot of traditional tea houses nowadays, and people on Instagram like to post pictures of it. But yeah,
just yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Dan? Because I mean, we've been speaking about freedom of speech and wanting people to touch on these topics. I mean, this is the only movie about the subject, but this movie's 30 years old, and they haven't even tried it since then.
Yeah, it's interesting. So 1989, it would have been 2020. Oh, it's been over 28 years since
30, almost 30.
Right.
It's as old as I am, bro.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
I was born in 89, so we're about the same. Me and this movie are about the same.
Right. So it's been 30 years since this topic has kind of been put into a movie format, eh?
Right. And obviously people have done it in books, right? Like I introduced the book, but no one has the balls to get in front of a camera and tell a story like this nowadays, even though it's 2019 and supposedly we can say anything we want.
Yeah, I guess me being born, me living in Canada, it's so much easier, I guess it feels like, for me to, you know, say whatever I want. I wonder, you've told me before that you've been met with opposition with your opinions about Taiwan and its future.
Certainly.
Yeah. So, you know, what I'll say is this. for the past couple of years, I've been, very, I guess, fond of YouTube in the sense that everybody has a voice on YouTube,
Mm.
even though there's been some controversy on
Right, and there's
on
been some crackdown. YouTube's not the Wild West that it used to be.
yeah. But for the most part, if you're not, I don't know. I mean,
What do you mean?
y-
As long as you're not, marching around with a swastika, like,
yeah, yeah. I mean, you and I won't have a problem with YouTube, I don't think.
yeah, yeah. I've had videos demonetized, but that's an
Hmm,
algorithm. Like, I don't think I've been targeted for anything that I've said.
right. There, I should let you link you. There's this YouTube channel called Wong Fu Productions, and they're basically Asian Americans who started making their own films. And I think one of there used to be like a led by three main founders of the channel, and I think one of them might be Taiwanese, half Taiwanese, or at the very least, I'm sure he identifies as Chinese. But I think they've made a film in a short film in Taiwan, and they actually helped Wang Lihong, a Taiwanese celebrity, make one of their music videos. And the interesting thing about them is they've spent 10 years making their own films, putting them on YouTube, that now they've tried to pitch some of their films to bigger
Like actual
distributors,
studios and stuff.
actual studios, and they actually have a film now on Netflix.
Really?
So I wonder if Taiwanese filmmakers could start doing that, and as they grow their own audience, maybe they have a chance of doing something like that.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. A book that I had mentioned a while ago. I'm not sure if you even remember it, but it's written by a Taiwanese American woman living here now in Taiwan. She wrote a picture book for kids in English about Taiwan. It's called Hey Taipei, and I actually ordered it online. But the way um, she started this project was just her and then a friend of hers, and then they did like a Kickstarter. They did like the Taiwanese equivalent of a Kickstarter, and that's how they got their thing funded, because there was no way a traditional publishing house was ever going to get involved with that, right? They just wouldn't see that as a suitable project to put their money into. And
Mm.
so maybe, some like enterprising young people here who have stories to tell could do Kickstarters and do their films that way. I don't even know.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean,
Just to get away, or not get away, but get over the wall of censorship, even though it's not an official wall of censorship, right? It's
yeah,
more of a political money wall.
yeah. Yeah, it is interesting that even within such a small island, that there is such polarizing views on what the country should be. And you know it's very interesting. Like, literally, there's people that want to join the Communist Party of of
Yeah,
China,
tiny,
and,
tiny minority,
then
a
there's
significant minority of people who really believe that they are free China, they are the nationalist Republic of China, right?
yeah,
They
yeah,
have a significant number of people who are like, we're Taiwan, we're Taiwanese, right? And then there's another tiny contingent who wants to be the Republic of Taiwan. And
yeah,
it's complicated.
yeah. Um, I should. I do kind of have to be with family in about 5-10 minutes, but
Okay, I mean, we can
let's.
start. That's all cool. We can start wrapping up. I just think,
Yeah.
like I said, it's a very interesting topic, and I don't know what the solution is
Mm,
for spreading more Taiwanese film to the world, but I think it's interesting what you brought up. I think one of the main ways we might get around this problem with all the with the politics and with the all the traditional gatekeepers is maybe just doing crowdfunding. I mean, like, just fuck all these old people and their politics and their concerns. Like, let's just do it among the people, and we'll put the film out there, and people can get pissed off, but who cares? Like, let's just go for it.
yeah. Honestly, I do have a lot of, I guess, faith in the power of YouTube. I've referenced before a Taiwanese YouTuber, Stop Kidding Studios, and he's very successful, and
Hmm.
I think he's actually coming on to 1 million subscribers very
That's
soon.
all people power too. There's no traditional gatekeepers there,
Yeah,
or big money or big politics there. It's all people power, you know.
yeah,
People
and
who liked him and decided, hey, I'll follow.
yeah, and I'm sure there's plenty of other Taiwanese YouTubers out there, and and they're the other Taiwanese YouTubers that I'm aware of. They're kind of doing their own thing. They're not talking about politics. At least the young people that I'm aware of, they're kind of talking about
Mm,
culture, dating culture, teaching some English, whatever
mm.
it is. It would be, I feel like, good for the conversation for the young people, the young YouTubers, Taiwanese YouTubers to bring these topics to light because I
Yeah,
do it does I do think that if you're very successful on YouTube, you can make a difference. Like PewDiePie, for example, had like a deal with Disney. A random
yeah,
Swedish
yeah.
guy.
Once upon a time, right?
Yeah,
That could
once
be.
upon a time.
Are you waiting for like the birth of like a Taiwanese equivalent of like a Jon Stewart to come out and start his own shit on YouTube and blow up and become famous?
That I would not object to that. Why
That would be
not?
pretty cool. Am I right? I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't. I mean, everyone needs to put aside their biases and stop, like, screaming internally because I mentioned someone who's pro-Democrat. But I mean, just someone who comes on and who can make jokes and who's not afraid to speak about politics.
Yeah, it's time will tell, and maybe you might be that guy. Oh well,
Yeah, I don't know if I'm as funny as John, but I
it,
have made movies that have angered people, or made not movies, but vlogs that have pissed people off.
yeah.
So
And Chris Chappell is a good example, right?
yeah,
He's
I like Chris a lot, but yeah, obviously Chris has a different focus, right?
Mhm,
His thing is on the main channel, and even his podcast is almost entirely focused on China because
mhm.
obviously China Uncensored. It's in the freaking title.
Yeah, yeah.
But we don't really have anyone doing that for Taiwan right now, you
Mhm.
know?
Ooh, pressure, pressure,
Yeah. Well,
pressure.
we'll keep trying our best. I think our podcast is a good place to start.
Yeah.
I think all of those movies that I mentioned, I want everyone to go and please check those out. Here they are again. It's a City of Sadness, right? Manga. Here we go. Black and White. Dawn of Justice. Right, here we go. Next one. We have Grandma and Her Ghosts. There she is. Okay. And on Happiness Road. And of course, Kano. And obviously, I want everyone to check out Taiwanese Braveheart. I want everyone to go see Sedeka Balai because just like Dan, they have badass daggers.
Yeah, that's right.
There we
Yeah.
go. So please check those out, guys. There's a lot. There's a lot on offer when it comes to Taiwanese films. Taiwanese film is good. There's a lot of good films that you can watch and get into. TV is trash here, but the movies are good. The movies are really, really good, and I want more people to check those out and tell their friends about it and spread the word. And I hope what we'll see in the future is films that are more daring and more exciting and not afraid to touch on sensitive issues.
Mhm.
And I'll leave it at that. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know on a scale of 1 to 10 how optimistic I am. Maybe I should just put my pessimistic ideas away and just like
Well, what would you like to see?
um yeah, well, it's definitely you mentioned the Taiwanese John Stewart. That sounds like a really good idea.
That sounds like a
Um
great idea. It's
yeah, and
hopefully someday a reality.
yeah, and maybe a Taiwanese citizen might rise up and become something like that. I would hope that their English has to be really good to attract outsiders. I think.
Yeah, so maybe a quote unquote ABC or someone like that.
Yeah.
Even that using that term is probably pissing people off, but
No, well, not to me, but yeah,
yeah, I know, but you know how it is. Someone's pulling their hair out right now,
yeah,
but
yeah. And I hope there's more, Taiwanese YouTubers that can, bring these
yeah.
issues to light and Taiwanese films. Taiwanese electric car wouldn't hurt at
Yeah, we
all.
should talk about that. Next time we can move on to, we can talk about music. We can talk
Yeah,
about automobiles. We can talk about scooters and anything really. And
yeah,
in the future, I think it would be really, really cool if we talked about Aborigines,
mm,
not just because I'm kind of a little bit obsessed because they have such a cool history and,
yeah,
they're kind of like the Vikings
huh,
of my world here, right?
yeah.
They're just badass with their daggers and their head hunting. But um, maybe someday we could have a conversation with that guy I mentioned, Tony Coolidge.
Yeah,
So that would be legit.
yeah,
Or even your aunt who has studied Aborigines. That would be legit as well.
yeah, yeah. That'd be nice. I wonder if I'll ever be able to convince her to come
Yeah,
on.
a lot of stories to tell. So many stories to tell.
Yeah,
This island is rich in stories.
yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna have to leave it there for today. I'm sorry, my
All
family
right, guys.
is.
So we'll be signing off. Thanks very much for watching. I appreciate it. Again, check the films out. Check out the book, and I'll see you all guys later. And yeah, I'll throw it over to Dan one last time. Dan.
Yeah, thanks you, Brian, for doing this with me, and I'm just happy we'll be doing this every once in a while. Hopefully, I'll be able to be more clear about when I'm available. But yeah, we'll keep in touch, and yeah, I'll see you everybody next time.
Yep. Bye, bye, guys.
Bye.